Hi, everybody, and welcome to our next class here on the flavors of emptiness, 6 flavors of emptiness, as I guess associated with in the context of our Mahamudra teachings or the emptiness of the mind teachings. So we've done 2 classes before, and we're on our 3rd one out of 6. So again, these are looking at the different 4 schools of emptiness in Buddhism. This is usually taught in context teaching in the Gelugpa tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, and how we see it. And so last class that we did, we sort of looked at the Sautrantika school. Previous to that was the Vaibhashika school, so sort of the Sutrists and the more the sort of Abhidharma schools. And their views of emptiness that'll give us sort of a good vipassana or sort of view of emptiness when we're meditating on our minds, how to understand emptiness, the context of emptiness as we apply it to meditating on the nature of our mind, meditating on sort of the ultimate nature, the conventional nature of our mind. Mind is defined in Buddhism as clear and cognizing. So what is the emptiness of that? Like, how do we sort of understand that or see that mind and its objects? So the first one we saw is that basically Vaibhashika school, one of the big sort of message or view that they're having is that everything is impermanent due to causes and conditions. So everything is changing. And so the mind is always changing, everything is always changing. And this is an antidote to the sort of object of refutation, the object of ignorance, or so forth, the wrong view, which is that things don't change. Most of all, that I don't change. Even on a practical level, most of us go through our lives where it's like, okay, it's fine that the world's changing, culture's changing, history's changing, whatever, everyone else is changing. But it's important that not only that I don't change, I'm the same person all along, but that I shouldn't have to change, right? On a practical level, everything should be about me and to cater to my prejudices and biases and tastes and values and so forth. And so in particular, in order to combat this, self-cherishing was based on the self-grasping of inherent existence, or things truly exist outside of any kind of change or outside of any kind of relationship to anything else, be that causal or be that the mind or anything. We apply this view that everything changes, and most of all, that we ourselves are changing. That in the Vaibhashika system, we're saying that we have 5 aggregates that make up the human person, and that's all we are. Like, and these things are constantly changing, sort of penetrating and working with each other, but there isn't some kind of unchanging self or soul that we associate with that's truly true, never changes, who, quote unquote, I really am, separate from this and mixed in somehow. Just everything changes. And so we can talk about the emptiness of the self or the emptiness of the mind in that regard. Second flavor going on, and again, this sort of dialectically leads to the next one, which is basically how do we understand how do we understand sort of the gap between things changing, presenting themselves to us in our experience, and sort of our conceptual representations or pictures of them, their ideas, our values, or anything else that we overlay on them. This is sort of the Sautrantic or Sutric school. And this is a big thing that you see, is that there's a difference between changing things and then our sort of pictures and representations that at least superficially seem to be the same or stay the same. Something that how we sort of, in terms of our own views, overlay this on experience or track experience or try and fit into our experience, so to speak. And the big take home for that one is, for that school, the Sutrist or Sautrantika school, is that there is a gap. And so what they say is, in terms of what's truly true, in terms of how I know what prominent valid cognition, is that my sort of conceptual experience of things, the initial contact we have with the world, insofar as it's fresh and new and unconstrued by being sick or on drugs or anything else, sort of a clear mind initial cognition of something, is valid, is true, is trustworthy, is sort of a correct belief, correct representation as much as we can, a correct picture, but just almost instantaneously, a moment after, the objects or things we're thinking about are changing because they're sort of interpenetrating in this vast causal network or network of relationships. And so at that point, our sort of concept on one level is no longer valid. So what's interesting is that this world of newness, this world that's constantly being created at each moment, is somehow being always representing itself to us at each moment, or sort of revealing itself to us at each moment. And there's a gap between how this world is and how we take it to be. So in that case, the newness or truth of the world is being forced on us. So what that should, the emptiness of this second flavor of, of emptiness, this sort of view, is that we're not in control. We're not manifesting directly reality as we see fit or as we want. Rather, reality is sort of pushing itself onto us, and so we're not in control ourselves. Not only is it true that the Vaibhashika view of the self or the mind, that there isn't some kind of inherently existing, permanent self or soul, that we just have five changing aggregates, but also there isn't some kind of superego, almost in a Kantian sense, putting the world together instantly as we're seeing it, that making it totally true the way it is in and of itself inherently. We're not a master controller self, and we can see this in our own life. As much as we want to take control of things and make the world exactly how we see it, we're seeing all the time how our attempts to control the world, or even our attempts to make sense of it, or our attempts to make it our view or how we see things for ourselves, so it would be that way for everybody else all time, truly once and for all, is always being thwarted. We're always being proven wrong. Things are always changing. We're always being upended. Our views are always being sort of cast over. And so rather than trying to get a correct representational view of the world, as one of my old philosophy professors say, the world from sideways on, like I'm going to be able to jump out of my mind and be able to look sideways between my mind and an object and can see them and see how valid my perceptions are of the object, or do they fit together properly. Of course, you could never do this because that itself would be a perception. It's more a case of learning to see the world, affirm the world as what's being come to you, to come to you as being separate from your small view of yourself, I guess you could say, sort of the small egoic view of yourself, trying to control things, the mass things, always being right, always understanding everything, trying to sort of manipulate life or this or that. Rather, it's about being open to change and open to this process of difference and creation. And we can see this, the constant newness when we meditate on our experience or on the mind, and how things come to us without us asking for it. This is part of the patience of Mahamudra, as we can sort of stay in that gap, whether thoughts come and go or whether they don't, or we have to be sort of fine with whatever happens to us. If that's the case, then we're not in control. By sort of the base of that the flow of experience is a little bit different than sort of the immediate flow or sort of conceptual map that we have of it. So that's the second view. Now, then this should get into our third flavor of emptiness. So I'm just, for auspiciousness, going to, because we're starting something new here, recite the Heart Sutra, for the blessing of emptiness, for our talk here. Okay. Hey, we are right here. So we just had the internet in the recording this from Osaka at my hotel room. So here again, and I had a wonderful trip again to the sacred Buddhist mountain and seat of Shingon Tantric Buddhism, Koyasan, which is a dear place close to my heart. Okay, we're saying the essence of Wisdom Sutra, homage to Professor Wisdom, the Blessed Mother. Thus I've heard at one time the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajgir in Mass Vulture's Mountain, together the great assembly of monks and nuns, the great assembly of bodhisattvas. That time the Blessed One was absorbed in the concentration of countless aspects of phenomena called profound illumination. That time also Spirit Valkshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, was looking perfectly at the practice of profound perfection wisdom, looking perfectly at the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Then, through the power of Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Spirit Valkshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, how should a son of the lineage train who wishes to engage the practice of profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and Spirit Valkshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, replied to Venerable Shariputra as follows. Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of the lineage wishes to engage the practice of profound perfection of wisdom should look perfectly like this. Subsequently, looking perfectly and correctly also at the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is none other than form, and form is also none other than emptiness. Likewise, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are empty as having no characteristics. They're not produced and do not cease. They have no defilement, no separation from defilement. They have no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, and no consciousness. There's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mentality, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no tactile object, no phenomenon. There's no I element, and so forth, up to no mentality element, also up to no element of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, no exhaustion of ignorance, so forth up to no aging and death, no exhaustion of aging and death. Likewise, there's no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no exalted awareness, and no attainment, also no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there's no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide in the perfection of wisdom. Their minds have no obstructions and no fear. Passing utterly beyond perversity, they attain the final nirvana. Also, all Buddhas reside perfectly in the three times, having relied upon the perfection of wisdom, became manifest and complete Buddhas in a state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the equal and unequaled mantra, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, since it's not false, should be known as a truth. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is proclaimed, Tayata Om Gata Gata Paragata Parisam Gati Bodhisoha. Shariputra, Bodhisattva, a great being, should train the profound perfection of wisdom like this. Then the Blessed One arose from that concentration and said, Spirit Valkshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being. Good lineage is like that, since it's like that just as you have revealed. In that way, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra, Spirit Valkshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, in the entire circle of disciples, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, demigods, and spirits, were delighted and highly praised what had been spoken by the Blessed One. Okay, so now, so going on to our third flavor of emptiness here, and we can just sort of, and just in our heart, sort of take refuge in emptiness, in the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Just what we're really, again, taking refuge, the real therapeutic cure, the real medicine for all of our sufferings based on our self-cherishing mind, our sort of selfish, egoic mind, predicated upon our self-grasping mind, that we believe in a false reality, that things exist without any sort of causal or relational status to anything else. And this false view of the world is what creates so much suffering for ourselves and others. So we're taking refuge in the opposite of that, in emptiness. And Buddha is a teacher who taught this, and the Sangha, our Buddhist community, that's helping us realize this on our own. And generating bodhicitta motivation, the motivation of great compassion and love, that we reach full awakening, sort of an angelic state of full awakening to having realized emptiness directly, to be able to teach the same truth to others. Okay, so the third flavor of emptiness is where we go into the sort of major, very popular, extremely influential Mahayana view of emptiness, taught by Sangha based on teachings from Arya Buddha Maitreya of loving kindness, and future Buddha, universal Buddha, fifth universal Buddha. And this is Yogacara, or mind only, or Chitta Mantra school of emptiness, what they call mind only. It's very, very influential, and it still is. And it's an amazing view of emptiness, and extremely helpful, and actually very, very complicated. So if you're doing Buddhist studies and you end up studying all the texts by Asanga, Vasubandhu, or other great Buddhist saints and scholars who've written on mind only, it's an amazing view on emptiness. And like I say, quite complicated and quite subtle. And also quite, in the end, quite therapeutic and quite practical in your day-to-day life. I mean, we say everything is mind, everything's your attitude. Like even sort of colloquially, sort of new age self-help, power positive thinking view that we all have here in the 20th century. Everything's your mind, everything's your attitude. We all say that. We might not have said a certain those kinds of pop psychology things years ago. Let's say, you know, the 19th or 19th, 18th, 17th century. Let's say in Europe, it was a completely different view. So what's the first thing that we can take away, the sort of the third flavor of emptiness according to the mind-only school? Well, dialectically, what's interesting, the Sutrantic school, when you study them in the logic school, and it's extremely difficult, their views on valid cognition and perception, you're getting sort of a dualism between conventional and ultimate truths, these being separate. Ultimate truths are the way things truly are being changing things in the world in permanent flows of energy or whatever you want to call it. And that conventional truths, truths that are not as they appear, whereas ultimate truths are always things are how they appear, are concepts and views and words and so forth. And there's a separation between them. And like I said, these things are seen representationally as being somehow flawed or not capturing. It's kind of like a picture isn't the object, it's the picture of. There's a separation there. So it's not, you know, pictures don't do justice. You know, I do a selfie somewhere here in Japan and people say, oh, it's a nice picture. And it's like, well, it's not really like being there. It's, you know, I couldn't get this or that. But what mind-only school says is that what you're always dealing with are pictures, is that what they call an aspect, that technically you don't perceive the object itself, you're perceiving a take on it because you are not the object. When I see a car driving away, it's not like a car's in my head. I'm seeing pictures or concepts or meaning contents or whatever you want to call it, the sense of words and concepts in myself. So that, like Hegel would say, it's at the beginning of the phenomenology. Someone like Immanuel Kant draws that distinction the same way between the phenomenal world and the noumenal world. The noumenal world is the world of things in and of themselves. And the phenomenal world is the things of our perceptions and our concepts. And they're quite dualistically separated. So what Kant's saying is that what we have access to is how reality is for us. We don't know how things are in and of themselves. And what Hegel says is that that's the starting point and the only point that matters, is that we can't, in the introduction of phenomenology, he says, you can't go to reality, look at reality sideways on. You can't leave your mind to compare your mind in the world to see how they link up and whether your take is a real take on real things, right? Or that your concepts properly represent the things themselves. And he said it would be if it was some instrument somehow, you know, engaging with an object, the very fact of the way the instrument is, the way we've designed it, how certain kind of values or presuppositions of what we're expecting. So this itself would mediate or change our perception of the object. It's a lot like in quantum mechanics, where the act of even perceiving, having light to perceive, changes an electron and changes the perception. You know, we all agree with this now in the 21st century, but this was pretty radical centuries ago to say this kind of thing. So Hegel says if you had an instrument trying to get in reality, you wouldn't get at reality. It would just be the engineering of your instrument. If you had some kind of screen or medium to try and see through, almost like binoculars or anything else, again, it's changing the perception. So in Force and the Understanding, chapter 3, the phenomenology, he says like that, this kind of cartoon view of science where we're trying to get outside of perceptions to see the way things are. He says it's like phenomena are a veil or a screen, you know, like kind of like a theater. You've got the curtain, and that how do I get on the other side of the curtain of my perceptions? So he said it's like you pull the screen back and it's just like a mirror. You just see yourself having gone to the other side of the screen or curtain. So what Hegel says is that that's not what's important. What's important are the perceptions, how they work, their status, you know, how I see myself in them. That's pragmatically the important question to ask, not trying to always figure out the representational quality of them. And I think that that's true. So it's the same thing here. What Mind Only said is that, you know, with an object for valid perception, you're trying with your concept or a picture of reality, you're trying to measure that against a changing thing, seeing how, you know, how does it fit properly? And mind only says is that between your mind and an object, there's always mediation or mental images or values or concepts or words. And so that's the only thing you're seeing. Now, they're not stupid. Everyone mind only, they only believe there's only mind, and it's, they're a complete kind of cartoon idealism. They're not denying there's a world like Hegel, separate from this. Of course, there is from their point of view, but the point is you don't have access to it. You have access to your mind, and that's the important thing about it. That's kind of the ethical and cognitive and ontological issue you have to deal with, not trying to jump over this gap. So they said you're dealing with your mental images. So what are these mental images and how do they work? So the first step of this, what Mind Only wants to see, is they sort of divide reality into three: mind and its objects, and our experience, our conceptual overlay of this process, our views and conventions and rules and so forth, and then sort of what they call storehouse conscious, or Laya Vijnana and Kunshi in Tibetan, which is mind storehouse of all, right? The underlying nature of mind to reality. So we'll talk a little bit more in the next class. I don't want to keep this too long, because it's the first thing of mind and its objects. This, again, is conventional reality for them. This is a study of relationships and causality and ultimately dependent origination. When we define mind as object possessor, you don't get mind without an intentional object. Mind is intentional. It is about the world. You can propositionally based or whatever you want to say, but mind is always in a relationship to something, which is why it's called object possessor in Buddhist psychology. It's always intentional. We always have an object. You don't have an object without mind. You don't have mind without an object. So it is a perfect example of dependent arising. A perfect thing to meditate on. Meditate on what you're meditating on. Well, there has to be you meditating on it. You're meditating. Well, it has to be something you're meditating on. Just sort of, it's a logical connection between the two. Now, what is that relationship? It's different dimensions and so forth. That's quite complicated, but that's a sort of fundamental fact. Next one we have is about views, conventions, and sort of what the mental image or sort of in a maybe psychoanalytic world you call it fantasy space here, of our takes, our rules, our conventions and conjectures and theories and everything so forth on that relationship. What's interesting for the mind only school here, and we'll talk more about in the next episode, is that seen as being false existence. It's kind of like a fantasy in like a fake way. So, it has a power and whatever. I mean, we do things with it, but the point is ideas, concepts, words and stuff have this sort of phantom existence where they're not really real. They're not really true. And then true existence. So in other words, how things, conventional existence is things, their mode of existence or appearance are different. They look like they're truly real, but they're not. In this case, they're always changing. Mind and objects are always changing and interrelationship. Ultimate truth, that things appear exactly how they are, right? There's no difference, is mind itself on the most deepest level with the Alaya Vijnana. And so we can just say this mind, this pre-personal anonymous mind, substratum of reality, which is just kind of like the movie you're in, the stage set, the stage that you're on, the whole movie set that you're on, the space that allows that to happen with all the changing facts of the movie or video that you're watching that make up conventional reality. And then your takes on the whole thing, your own particular opinions on it, is sort of the image mediation of it. But ultimate truth is just mind. So we say mind only. Okay. Now, what's important with that in this view of emptiness is that when we meditate in the emptiness of our mind, let's say when we're meditating on feelings, we're just watching our mind and we're having certain kinds of feelings. This first view of emptiness here, emptiness flavor number 3, will be about conventional reality in the mind-only system, is the idea that mind itself has objects. So we saw that the world is always being, on emptiness flavor number 2, being forced on us. These objects of the world is forcing us to think, forcing us to experience, forcing us to have takes on it. This here is that the emptiness flavor number 3 is more subtle, is that when we're meditating, let's say on a feeling, sort of being forced on us another, it's acknowledging that relationship okay, is mind always has an object. When we're meditating on the nature of the mind, we're watching our thoughts come and go. Our mind always has an experiential content. Now, when we, the emptiness of it is that when we look for what that content is as an object, it unpacks, explodes, and sort of goes into a whole series of relationships that overflow itself. But nevertheless, we are always in a relationship to something. Okay. Now, it's interesting is we take it a little bit deeper here because that's what emptiness flavor 1 and 2 would say. Mind is empty. It is always in an intentional relationship with something. Things are always changing. Things are being forced on us. So mind only takes it a little bit deeper, and they say, well, what's the nature of that relationship? What's the nature of the object and the mind perceiving it? So what they say is this understanding of emptiness is that that object is forced on you or appearing to you because it's karmically tied to you. Okay. They say that this is their whole thing in that the context of Alaya Vijnana, the whole sort of screen of our life, karmic seeds or energies are ripening into sort of this at each moment, 65 moments, like in a finger snap here, of 65 individual minds with their individual objects. So reality is kind of like frames of a movie at each moment of a mind and its object ripening or appearing like out of the seed, like the flower, the budding seed, you get like out of a seed, like budding, seed of a flower, you get the flower bloom. You're getting an object and a mind at that point. So the emptiness here is the emptiness of any false position that would deny that would say my mind and what I'm perceiving have nothing to do with each other. They're completely separate. This is where you get on day-to-day, like, why is this happening to me? Oh my God, this is nothing, none of my business. This doesn't have anything to happen to me. Not my problem. But actually, technically, anything appearing to you at each moment, not only is it being forced on you, why is it being forced on you? It's coming from you. There's no coming at you. It's coming from you. So this is how we take emptiness flavor 2 into something deeper than emptiness flavor 3, is we're reversing it. It's not that this changing world's overflowing my sort of pathetic attempts to control it and figure it out. The reason it's difficult to understand this except is I'm looking at a telescope backwards. Like remember when you look at the little pointy end here and the big end there and you look at a star, wow, but imagine having it backwards, doesn't look right. Well, it's the same thing here. Our deluded mind and misunderstanding of reality always has everything acts backwards, where the whole world has nothing to do with me. I'm the poor little victim, just thrown here by circumstance or random facts about the universe, and everything's happening to me. The universe is just grinding me down, and I'm doing my best to survive here. Mind only says, no, actually, this is your movie. You're waking up in a movie that you yourself are projecting. So the moviness of the movie is the Alaya Vijnana, is the emptiness of the mind, the ultimate nature of the mind, right? So you have to think more on that big level of you're in your own movie and you yourself, let's see, Mike's of Matthew Richards, and the one little silly character running around doing things, but technically it could be different depending on the karmic seeds. Right? It's like in a Lacanian sense, traversing the fantasy, like Jacques Lacan would say, is understanding from the most fundamental point of my childhood what kind of huge cosmic role I've taken on to kind of survive castration complex. Like, am I the victim? Am I the abandoned child? Am I the overachiever to get love or whatever? It's kind of like finding these fundamental roles in your life. Well, it's the same thing here. My sense of ego or self is this kind of dress up Shakespearean role that I'm taking in this big play, but the plainness of the play is Alaya Vijnana. And the conventional nature is all the experiences and minds and little things I have to do or little roles I have to play at each moment that make up the details of my life. But the point is that I have to own them because they're me. Every experience I have is karmically generated from the past. My past lives is in this sort of beginningless mind that goes beginningless in the past and the endless in the future. All these karmic seeds ripening. And the selfless and the anonymous and pre-personal quality of this whole process, the cosmic nature of this whole process, is Matthew Richards here didn't create all this because it far exceeds him. But the point is this is like, it's like the trilogy. I'm finding myself in part number 2 here and thinking, oh man, what's going on? But I haven't even in my own movie seen part number 1. I don't know what's coming in part number 3. But the point is, if you had an omniscient narrator, omniscient kind of spectator who could sit back and see the whole trilogy of your life, independent of how you're seeing it, you would see how they're all interrelated. So emptiness flavor number 3 is, again, denying or is an antidote to or correction to the false view that even though we might think that mind is intentional, mind has an object, that somehow I've had nothing to do with this process of how to set up this relationship, that I have nothing to do with how objects appear to me, that they're not meaningful or not related to me in sort of a bigger sense. But really, at each moment, what is happening? There's a karmic seed ripening in the mind, creating my particular experience that when I divide it out, I can talk about a perceiver and a perceived. So I have to own that. I'm just looking at my little notes here. Yeah, so it's a perfect karmic ecology. Okay, you meet your object because of past deeds of cause, actions or causes that create the effect of your experience, the result of the experience that you're having right now. So again, what's the take home from this emptiness? How is this? Well, we can see how the number 1, that this is a good therapeutic lesson to get, because it puts you in the driver's seat. This is existentially, this in a Sartrean way, this is your life. You are your actions. You are your choices. You are your thoughts. You are creating everything in a big cosmic sense. Everything coming to you is from past lives, of course. Everything you're creating now is going to sort of forward things into a future time of this life or into future lives. So the positive take home is that I can create the world that I want to live in, that I can create the self I want to live in. I'm in the driver's seat. I can authenticate, validate, and justify my life. And again, make it the work of art that it should be. The bad news is, of course, that on one level, I'm a victim of myself, and no one is going to hear me scream in the jungle, that I can't blame anybody. I can't blame God. I can't blame other people. I can't blame history. I can't blame social structures. I can't blame spirits. I can't, you can have a whole list of enemies that you can draw up and point the finger at. But in the big picture, all things is karmic seeds that create the experience that we are experiencing right now, sort of witnessing as a movie. So your past mind created what you're seeing right now. The result that when we're doing Mahamudra and seeing it, just mind meditating on mind, that's the past. My attitude towards it is, and how I'm reacting to it is the future. Okay, so in other words, I'm being given a script and they say, Matthew, we need you to write the next part of the script. I'm looking through the script, kind of shitty script. I'll do my best here. So you keep writing, and then this is what you get for the future. So we can see, even having the natural attitude, resting in natural mind, having a mind of openness, of kindness, of love, acceptance, and forgiveness. What kind of editing work is that? That's good editing for how I'm going to take things. And again, it's embracing, having that Mahamudra attitude is embracing this whole Chittamantra view that objects or the world and my mind are the same thing. It's the same process. It's me. I have to own it. This is a good thing. Because it's me, I can make a change. I can make it beautiful. I can forgive it. I can affirm it. I can see it as myself and take joy in it, but also responsibility for it in a real fundamental existential way. Okay, so this is the introduction to Yogacara, which, as you can see, I really like it a lot as a view on emptiness. I think even if you just literally, in the third flavor here, you just draw a line in the sand and just stay here and live your life according to this, it's amazing. You'd be a very, very good Buddhist. Okay, so let's just take a moment to dedicate this. May this be everything we've done today together here in this class, a little short class, be for the welfare of all sentient beings and the enlightenment of all sentient beings. And next class will be the second part of the Mind-Only School, where we're treating the sort of intermediary or mediation of the mind, sort of the work of the imagination or fantasy element of the mind. Okay, so see you next time. Love in the Dharma.